Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about Danny Masterson, specifically his prison sentence. Okay. Um, I already did a video where I just sort of briefly talked about his personality and sort of what I think of his case and his kind of his psychology, basically. But in this video, I just kind of want to address the issue that I think a lot of YouTubers have been talking about, which is what can Danny Masterson sort of expect in terms of his prison sentence? In other words, what will his experience in prison most likely be like? Okay. I've heard a lot of YouTubers kind of sensationalizing the case a bit, and I think we all want him to be punished. I think for what he did, but I think there may be a little eagerness to sort of hope, maybe kind of wishing that maybe he gets a really severe experience. Maybe he gets assigned to like a high security prison where he's in like a genpop general population with like really dangerous people, just hanging out with gang members and basically being in terror for the rest of his life. To be quite honest, okay, let me just a little background. Okay, I work in criminal defense. Okay, I've been working in criminal defense for about 12 years. Okay, I work in federal cases. I work in appeals and trials for federal criminal cases, and I also work in also in civil cases as well. I've been working in litigation for more than 20 years. Okay, but only in the last 12 years have I moved into federal criminal defense and also some state criminal defense in Florida. Okay, so I have experience in a range of cases, a lot of, like, say, drug trafficking. We've done a little bit of pornography, child pornography, and I've done some white collar stuff. So I do have experience with common complex federal crimes. Um, but I also have experience with how sentencing works. Okay, and so I'm sure that California is like almost every other state. The judge can only control the term of the sentence. Okay, but corrections takes custody of Danny Masterson, and the Department of Corrections is under control of assessing his risk to others, his risk of being victimized by others. Okay, and also maybe any issues he may have in terms of, let's say, health issues, medical, whatever. And Department of Corrections is in full control over how he gets assigned and what his experience will be like in prison. Okay, so it's out of the judge's hand at this point, and even the lawyers have a limited ability to interfere. So if there's going to be any politicking around this, it's going to be through back channels. It's not going to be through the court anymore. So let's say if Danny Masterson's attorneys want to try to get him to like the lowest population or maybe a hospital facility, they're going to have to kind of politic that directly with the Department of Corrections. And I'm not really sure how that works because that's very delicate. Usually corrections sort of assumes sort of full control over their prisoners, but there's always room for influence in any governmental body. And I think we have to be realistic. The richer a person is, the richer a defendant is, the more they can kind of have a little bit of influence in how things work out. How that influence may be very indirect, and I don't know all the back channels and all the chess that gets played in the back channels. But basically, because Danny Masterson is such a high profile defendant at this point, the Department of Corrections can't afford to have an embarrassment. Okay, and so they're going to be very, very careful, and probably, at the highest levels of corrections, you're going to have people who are probably like at the top of anything. The people who are at the very top of corrections in California are probably politically connected people, and those people know people and know people. And so Scientology, because it has such a high influence, because Danny Masterson comes from a high profile family in California, um, the bottom line is it's a small world at the top. Okay. And so I don't think Department of Corrections can't afford to screw this up, basically. And so they're gonna do whatever it takes to avoid something really embarrassing. Because in the end, this guy's guilty of whatever he's guilty of. Yeah, he's guilty. But at the same time, he's a high profile actor. Okay, and his family is well connected. So, if anything, it's maybe for his family more than for him. But I'm pretty sure that he will not go to a high security prison where he'll end up like in Gen Pop with like say gang members and people that have committed murders and stuff like that. No way, no way, not at all. I think they'll probably assess his risk. His risk to other people, I think, is very low. Okay, I think Danny Masterson committed a little bit of violence in his crimes, yes, but I don't think he's a dangerous person like a gang member or like a murderer or whatever. He's probably a very low risk inmate. Okay, but probably the risk for him is what other people could do to him because he's famous, he's high profile, um, and so I expect corrections to really analyze him, to really look him over. And a lot of people have said that because he didn't want to participate in his PSR or his PSI, the pre-sentencing investigation, that somehow means that corrections will give him no assistance. That's not true. Corrections will analyze him. They'll study him. They'll do their own assessment of him. Okay, and it's not just what he reports. They'll look at him. They'll guess how much of a risk he is to other people based on his background, his behavior in jail. And I think they're going to determine, I believe, that Danny Masterson is not really dangerous to other inmates. Okay, I'm sure they're going to determine that. Okay, and I think it's a fair determination. But they're also going to determine that he's very likely to be at high risk of being victimized by other inmates. Okay, so with that profile in mind, I think he'll end up probably first. I think he'll end up in a hospital prison. Okay, and the reason I say that is because he's been in a hospital care in Los Angeles jail. Okay, and that's because my understanding is he's a long time alcoholic. Okay, and he has a lot of alcohol withdrawal issues. Okay, that's my understanding, and maybe some other chemical dependency issues. Okay, so he's going to need, I think, honest to goodness medical care to sort of help him taper off whatever chemical dependencies he's had. And as he goes into those chemical dependency, that kind of chemical dependency withdrawal, I am sure that given his circumstances, he will see a spike in his anxiety and his insomnia, his difficulty falling asleep, probably, or if anything, just anxiety. So at some point, as he goes through that withdrawal, I think a psychiatric profile will start to arise where he'll need at least some kind of attention. Okay. And a lot of people have said that they won't give a shit that he's a Scientologist and they'll just give him, basically like veterinary psych drugs, basically. And my opinion is that because he's so high profile and because in the United States, you are allowed to interpose religious questions into how you're treated in prison. For example, we've seen that even one of the people involved in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, this like shaman or whatever, he made a kind of like a spiritual he made like a spiritual petition based on his spiritual beliefs that he had to eat only organic food, and basically they had to accommodate him. Well, likewise in California, if Danny Masterson cites his religious issues with certain types of psych medication, he probably will get some accommodation because it's a religious request. You know what I mean? So I don't think they're just going to give him whatever drugs they feel like it. I think they're probably going to kind of tailor his medical treatment around maybe his possible discomfort or concerns with certain medications that might be really contrary to, like, say, Scientology policy or whatever. So I think they'll probably really tailor his medical care as he goes through his withdrawal from alcohol and maybe other substances. So I expect maybe the first stage for him to be like in kind of a hospital setting. Okay. And then eventually, once they stabilize him, I think they're going to look for a very low security facility where he can be around other sex offenders who are similarly not very dangerous. Okay. So we're looking at kind of like the kind of sex offenders who are maybe like the child porn, maybe some like pedophile type people who are, they're dangerous to children, but they're not really dangerous like to other adults. So he'll be around basically very wimpy, very weak, like weak and wimpy type of people. And I don't expect him to be around any like muscle bound, hardcore, prisoners. He's not going to do that kind of time, I don't think. Okay, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I think I would be shocked. I would be shocked, and I think it would be a terrible political blunder for California, for the Department of Corrections to handle him that way. I think that would actually be very negligent. Now, granted, you could say, well, gosh, what about other people that don't get the royal treatment? Well, that's just the way it is. when people have a lot of money and they're really, really well connected in a state, it's just amazing how things work. And I've seen this happen, personally. So so I think that more than likely, I think he'll start off with a period of hospital care in a prison hospital, and then I think as they assess him and start to kind of see him stabilize, once he gets a little bit stabilized, I think he'll end up in a relatively low security prison facility where he's around a lot of very kind of feeble, not very dangerous kind of pedophile type, sex offenders. Because remember, there are people who are guilty of committing, let's say, the R word, right? The R word, sexual penetration, basically. Some of those people are very dangerous and they're very physically dangerous. Okay. I think the Department of Corrections knows how to kind of separate those sex offenders, and he'll be around the more weakling, delicate, sort of not dangerous kind of sex offenders. And that's my prediction, because I think he has that profile. He doesn't look like he's dangerous to other people, and he doesn't look like it doesn't look like it would be very smart for corrections to expose him to people who could be physically dangerous. So it's going to suck for him to be in prison, absolutely. But I think he's going to get a relatively comfortable kind of prison experience compared to other people in California. I really believe that. Now, if I'm wrong, I'll be surprised, but that's my prediction. So, in any case, yeah. And by the way, very similar with Donald Trump. Okay, a lot of people are just thinking, oh yeah, Georgia's got him with hardcore charges. Now those charges in Georgia, those will really stick, and he'll have to go to a Georgia prison. And I guarantee you, even if it's written in blood in Georgia, even if the statutes say that he has to go to prison, I guarantee you, because he's a president, I guarantee you that it's one of those things when people get so high profile, and also Donald Trump's an older person. When you have a really exceptional prisoner, it's amazing how new laws are made. Like the laws don't apply basically. And when it comes to sentencing and how you actually serve a prison sentence, if you're a special enough person, things will get adapted so you don't actually have to do that prison sentence. At the worst possible case, Donald Trump might have to do prison at home, like home prison or whatever. But he lives in home prison already, because when you're a president, an ex-president, you can never be free. You're always under surveillance. You're always under the custody of the Secret Service. So if you really think about it, any ex-president is already in home detention. You know what I mean? So, it's one of those sad things when people are very high profile, they do not get treated the same way. And that's what I think is going to happen with Danny Masterson. I think he's going to have a very soft, very comfortable prison experience. The only thing that's going to suck for him is he probably will be able to see his wife, I'm sure, but just basically living in a prison, for a rich person, even to be in a low security prison, it's just going to suck for him, and he will have to live without alcohol and live without his usual drug habits or whatever. So it's going to suck, but I think it's going to be pretty comfortable. And I don't think any gang members or any hardcore criminals are going to beat him up in prison. I don't think he'll ever be exposed to that. I honestly believe that. So it's just my opinion. And thanks for watching. Wishing the best to everybody.